Content Bite. We're a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Lynn Testoni and I'm a writer, content creator and a journalist. My co-host, of course, is the lovely Rachel Smith. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, Lynn. Hello, everybody. I am the founder of Rachel's List and I'm a freelancer myself. And today we are talking about balancing parenting with freelancing. A very big question that we often get at Rachel's List. And Lynn and I have both done it, but it's quite interesting because our experiences have been widely and wildly different. Mostly because about 25 years separates our parenting experiences. I think we should start with you, Lynn. What do you reckon? Tell me about your parenting journey.
My parenting journey. Well, I think it's interesting because things have changed a lot and technology has also changed. So I think the flexibility has changed a lot in those 25 years. I was actually at Clio when I became pregnant. And it's really funny. I often say that even though when we were at Clio, we always talked about how women could have careers and families, but nobody on staff had ever done it. So we're all very theoretical. Anyway, I did leave Clio when I was pregnant. I was about 5 months pregnant and I worked part-time and casually for the next 7 or 8 years. I can't remember exactly. For Cumberland Newspapers, which is now the News Local Group, which is a group of local newspapers. And I worked part-time and almost full-time until I had Isabel, my second child. And I had about 3 months off to have her. And they were really good to me, I have to say. They were really lovely and flexible because I was casual. I was a timesheetie. I just worked as a sub and they used to let me have long lunch hours. I used to go home and breastfeed Claire. And come back at first, and then they were pretty good. And I trained all the cadets for Cumberland, so I was the cadet counsellor for about 5 years of that. So when I went back after having Isabel, I worked part-time just doing the cadet training before I started working back on the newspapers again.
But how long did you take for maternity leave both times? And what was your maternity pay like back then?
Well, that's the thing. There was no maternity pay at all then.
Right.
So I didn't have maternity pay. You could actually have unpaid maternity leave, but I was a casual, so I wasn't entitled to that. So that's why I joined Cumberland. I did join them when I was 5 months pregnant and I worked full time for them until I had Claire. And then I had about 6 months off with Claire. And then I went back part-time 1 day, then 2 days, and I increased it till I was working full-time before I had Isabel 2 years later. And then I had 3 months off with Isabel. And then I went back a few hours a week doing the cadet training. And then I went back to 1 day, 2 day until I was working full-time when she went to school.
Wow. So you had a 2-year-old and a newborn and you took 3 months off.
Yes.
You're dynamite. I think 3 months into having one child, I was literally out of my mind with sleep deprivation. There was no way I could have gone back at 3 months. That's amazing. But were you really careful with the kind of work that you chose?
Yeah, I was. I didn't do a lot of writing. I did mostly sub-editing. And I did plan when I had Claire to do some freelance writing, thinking, I'll sit there and interview and stuff when the baby's asleep. And that never seemed to happen. So I found that sub-editing was easier with the kids because I basically went in, did my work and came home and I had set days and I had childcare for those set days. Mm-hmm. So when they were little, I had a nanny looking after Claire, but also childcare was really hard to find. Like Claire is now 33 and there was actually no childcare available. There was a year-long waiting list in every childcare in my area, which of course I had not realised until I had a baby. And then so I had a nanny and then I did the same.
Do you remember what you paid your nanny back then?
Oh my God, when I think about it, but I paid my nanny $100 a day and I earned $110 a day.
Oh. It's pretty much the case for women these days, isn't it?
I mean, sometimes I wonder about that, but I do think that it did keep my hand in my career because at that time, well, it's probably the same. There were so many technological challenges that I know some women who stopped working and when they came back into the industry like 5 years later, the technology had moved on so much. It was really hard to get up to speed. I didn't lose any sort of time in my career, but I didn't move forward for years though.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
But
And
Cumberland was really nice to me, I must say.
So how did you then manage, like, sort of working a full day and all the aftercare stuff? Was there aftercare?
No, there wasn't. So I have used every form of childcare known to man, Rachel. So there wasn't aftercare at this kids' school. There was one in the community that was really difficult, and my kids went there for about 6 months, but it was too hard. So I employed another mother at school who used to look after my kids after school, and I used to pick them up when I was at Vogue by then. And then the school didn't have an after school, so I actually set one up. I set up a committee. And then we got it going because it just made my life easier. And I chaired that committee for the next 2 or 3 years, I think. Yeah.
Oh my God. If you don't have the right childcare, just do a lid and create your own childcare.
Exactly. And you know, what's really funny is most people, all the childcare around was only till 6 p.m. And I didn't finish till 5:30 and I couldn't get there till 6. So I said, I'll set it up as long as we make it 6:30. And we did. I made the hours to suit me.
Oh my God. That's amazing. I remember you told me, was it Isabel who used to play cards with the carers, and she would sit there and play cards when you were...
Oh my God, because it was so hard to get there by 6:30. There was one bus. I was at L then. There was one bus outside L that used to get there. And if I didn't make the 5 to 6 bus, I'd have to catch the next one. And then I'd have to sprint from the top of Lane Cove to the bottom of the hill. It was a kilometre. Sometimes I sprinted in heels because I was at L, obviously, and you had to wear heels. And I get there at like 28 past 6. And Isabel had been there for the last half hour by herself with Olivia, the after school, and they would play Spit, which is a little 2-person card game. Isabel is amazing now at cards. She's 30. Yep. And I reckon that was all those years of perfecting her skills at after school care.
Oh my gosh. So your 2 girls have now grown up, but you do have a stepdaughter at home, and your freelancing coincided with her final years of school.
Yeah,
is that
so
right?
she's 18 now. She's just finished school, her HSC, and the last 4 years I've been freelancing. And I must say, I wish I'd been able to have this flexibility when my kids were little, because it's just been so much easier. I've been home when if she's been sick. I mean, obviously it's different with a teenager when they're sick than if you have, like, you know, the age of your child, Charlie. It's been so much easier, and I've been able to things like when she comes home from school, I have a lovely chat with her and things like that. And then I go to work, and I can work to 7 if I'm still catching up. And I don't have that sprint, that childcare sprint from 5:30 to get to that train or the bus was just a really stressful thing. And also school holidays. School holidays are a nightmare. My kids have done tennis camps, acting camps, production camps, sports camp. They've done everything. Horse riding, they've done. I used to. It was really hard, and I juggled all this sort of stuff, and so that was quite tricky.
Gosh, my experience is really different, I suppose, because I was already freelancing from home when I had Charlie. I think I was pretty set up to work from home, and I had this very established client base, and I think I'd worked from home for 15 years or something. So
did you take time? You did take time off, didn't you? I remember, because I was commissioning you for stories, and I remember you taking some maternity leave when you had Charlie.
I did. I worked right up until the end, and then I was I was aiming to take 4 months off, and that just completely fell by the wayside because by 4 months I was not in any state to go back to work. But I think I took off 9 months, and I'll just talk about some of the things that are available now for, you know, new mums that might be different.
Because there's a parental leave.
Oh, there's lots of stuff now. So I got the parental leave payment, which is 18 weeks of minimum. I think it's the minimum wage payment, which worked out as about $600 a week, I think. And that was just a massive help. Like, that's
took the pressure off.
Absolutely. You have to really apply for it beforehand, and it is a bit of a punish, but it's really good to do that. And
do you find some of those government things are hard when you're self-employed? Like, you know, we're not a conventional employee.
Yeah, but I got that because I didn't have access to any, you know, traditional sort of mat leave, because obviously if you're a staffer, you get that.
Yeah.
But I think you can't double dip and get that 18 weeks as well. Or maybe you can get part of it. It might be that your workplace covers some of it, and then you can cover some of it. So you can look into, you know, what you can get, because it's really good and it can just take the pressure off at a time when you literally feel upside down and you're getting no sleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting to have that 9 months off, and then I started back very slowly doing part-time work. But I was working around Charlie, and I would literally cram all my work into his 2 naps a day. So if I was lucky, I'd get 3 hours a day working around his naps, and then I'd work at night or whatever I could do. But I was really careful about what I took on. I took on very basic stuff, nothing, no massive features with lots of interviews, because guaranteed he'd wake up while I was interviewing someone. And
that's what I remember about freelancing with the little kids, that the unpredictability of babies, which, you know, in theory they all do what the books say, but they don't really, do they?
No, it was just too hard. But so I remember that being a really hard period until just getting enough work. I just didn't really put a lot of pressure on myself. But then when he was 2 and was, you know, could talk a bit, we thought we'll get a nanny, and we got a nanny for 2 days. But we looked at all the different options. So you could basically do your childcare, a nanny, a family daycare, which is like where the educator has a smaller amount of kids out of their home. Or you could do, a lot of people do mixed care, where they do some, you know, formal childcare, and then the grandparents have, and my parents came for a half a day. So by the time we got the nanny, I was working 2.5 days a week, 2 days with the nanny, half a day with my parents coming every week. Yeah, but it's a massively expensive option, getting a nanny.
I shared a nanny with all my friends. So this particular nanny, it was very hard to find childcare back then, but she actually was the daughter of my chief of staff.
Oh, wow.
And she was just finishing nannying school, and she helped me out in the school holidays. And then I said, well, I love to keep you, but I only needed 2 or 3 days a week. And she said if we could fill the other days. So basically I had a big meeting with all my friends with with childcare. And we all, every year we used to mix and match. So sometimes she'd mind 2 or 3 of our kids together. And every December or November, we used to have like a Christmas dinner, and we'd all say, okay, what are you doing next year? And somebody'd say, well, I'm working Tuesday and Thursday. And somebody'd say, I'm having a second baby, so I won't be doing, and we'd all rework out the schedule between us. And that worked for, I think, 4 or 5 years. Yeah, it was amazing. It was a really lovely collection of women juggling everything.
I think that can be really cost effective, sharing a nanny.
Yeah.
I did look into it a little bit, but it was easier just having having a nanny that was sort of dedicated to us. And I think we paid her 25 to 30 an hour, which obviously if you go to childcare, you can now get the childcare subsidy, and that's a percentage of your combined income, I think, that you get back. That's changed recently, so we'll put the links and the details on how to work out what you're eligible for. But if you do get a nanny, you can't get that unless you get a government approved nanny. So you literally have to go to a website, find a nanny that's a registered nanny with the government, and hire those. And I think that there's a lot less of them. So if you get a nanny, you're pretty much up for the cost. So you've really got to work your butt off in order to make your nanny worth it.
I do think that sometimes one of the things I found, having somebody at my house looking after my kids, it meant that unless they were really sick, she could look after them. One of the challenges with childcare, when you put your kids in childcare at the beginning, they get sick a lot, and sometimes they're not really sick, they just have a runny nose or an ear infection, so they're not so sick that you want to be with them, but they can't go to childcare. So I used to justify the cost of the nanny that I didn't skip out all the work, particularly as I was a casual. So if I didn't go to work, I didn't get paid. That was part of my justification for the extra cost.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why we decided on a nanny as opposed to childcare as well, because when you've got 2 contractors in the one house, if your kid is going to get sent home sick, you still have to pay for childcare, but you're not working, so you don't make money yourself, and you've got the kid at home. So it was the only solution that we actually had. A lot of people said you should be sending Charlie to childcare and he needs that socialization. And actually I agree with that. I think childcare is brilliant for that reason, you know, that early socialization and, you know, that very different kind of care that they get with other children and stuff. Whereas the nanny is very much one-on-one, and there has to be a lot more kind of organising of play dates and making sure that the kids at the park and getting those social skills. Yeah, it's worked for us. Yeah.
I think childcare does work, but long daycare, I think it's more expensive in Sydney than other places where we are, because it's look a long daycare place often costs between $160 and $200 a day in Sydney. So you're looking at a similar cost, and nannies are more cost effective if you have a couple of kids.
Yep.
So my nanny used to look after Isabel during the day when she was little, and then pick Claire up from preschool. She used to finish at 3 and bring her home. And that meant, so Isabel had some one-on-one time, and then I didn't have to rush home to pick up Claire. That gave me more flexibility. So that was good.
Yeah.
So, and you've been part-time, you were part-time for a long time, but you've gone back to full-time this year, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was part-time until Charlie started school, and he started school this year. So obviously this has been a weird year with lots of homeschooling, but it coincided with my husband being between contracts. So he handled a lot of the homeschooling while I was in the bedroom working. But I have to say, yeah, my income has accelerated hugely since Charlie went to school. Yeah. Because I suddenly had 5 days and it was amazing. And then we put him in aftercare 3 days a week. There's a brilliant aftercare attached to his school, which is just fantastic. They also do vacation care. So we sort of select a few days where he does that, and then we try and have a family holiday, but sometimes it's not possible, both being contractors. So it's good to have those options. It saved my life, really. Yeah.
Well, I must admit that I don't think I had a holiday for years because I didn't get paid if I had a holiday. So I try and juggle. When I was working part-time, I sometimes would do something like work a week full-time in the holidays when the kids would go to a holiday camp, and then I'd have a week off with them. So, but it was a constant juggle. I must admit that with my stepdaughter finishing school, this is the first time that I can take a holiday out of school hours for 25 years.
Wow. It's really interesting, isn't it, when you work for yourself? You've got to really think about what works for you, how you can manage your time. And I think actually having a kid is an end to procrastination. It literally just kicks it out of you, doesn't it? Because you've got such slivers of time to get stuff done.
You think, I've only got an hour to do this, I've got to do this. And also, I must admit that sometimes it's easier. Just technology has improved so much. You can write, you can work, you can do all these things that I couldn't do back in the day. And I love the flexibility of freelancing. As a parent, I think that's why a lot of people choose, a lot of women particularly choose to freelance. Men do as well. But I think there's the two main reasons for freelancing. One is to balance family. The other one is because you have a bad experience, you get made redundant or something, and then you start doing it accidentally and go, wow, this is good. But flexibility when you have a family is one of the best things about it, I think.
I would have to agree. I remember my sister, who's a psychologist, and she works at TAFE, so she was constantly driving an hour or more in peak hour but trying to manage dropping her kid to school and all of that, like the commuting and stuff. And she would just say to me, you are going to be so sorted when you have Charlie. I remember when I was pregnant, she said, you won't know yourself. Life will be really so much easier when you work from home and work for yourself. And she was right. You really can manage your time so much more effectively, and just cutting out that massive commute and all the hassle that goes into going to an office, I think. Yeah.
I do think that you were talking about working around Charlie, and I did a little bit of that with my kids. You've got to make sure that you still have some boundaries, because otherwise, basically, when you've got if you might have somebody else there, your partner or something on the weekend, you can often catch up on work. But I do know there's a lot of people that put their kids to bed at sort of 7 or 8, and then they work till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, which works occasionally to get stuff done, but it's a real hard punish if you're doing this for months on end.
Yeah, no. I do that sometimes now.
Yes, I know you're more of a late night person than I am.
I'm trying not to, though. We basically just spent the week mainlining The Crown, so I put my computer away and we were just on the couch.
Fair enough.
It was a really nice break.
But that is the hard thing, that sometimes when you are freelancing at home, you're just either doing childcare or work and you have nothing else. So that you've got to make sure that
Yeah,
need
you do.
boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. But it is when kids are sick and you've got that flexibility, the amount of times I didn't have a sick leave day in 10 years that for myself. So I just would have to drag myself to work if I was sick, because any sick leave I had to be saved for when the kids were sick.
Yeah, right. So there's all that to
So
consider too.
yeah, and I found that really hard. But but I did it, And my daughters are lovely and well adjusted. Sometimes I worry, and I've given Isabel lots of card skills inadvertently.
Well, the jury's out on Charlie, but we can do a follow-up episode in 10 years.
Yes. Well, I think that the truth will come when Isabel and Claire have their own children.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
And then
that's
maybe
right.
they'll have a whole new appreciation of the juggling.
Exactly. Well, look,
Yeah.
we hope that's been of interest to anyone out there who's considering having a baby and doesn't know kind of how to organise what kind of childcare to go for. Obviously, we both are real fans of nannies. Yeah.
If you had to say what's the best thing you did and what's the biggest mistake you made?
If I had a second child, I would probably still do a mixture of a nanny, but I would probably throw some childcare in the mix, I think, just because I think it is really good for kids to have that early socialization with other little kids. Yeah, I think I was such a helicopter parent. I was trying to control all of that so much. And now I think I'd be a bit more relaxed about some of that. But I have to admit, I think the best thing I did was get a nanny. That's not only did it save my sanity, but it gave me back my career, which I'd sort of effectively put on hold. And I felt so much better getting back to it and getting back to writing. Even if you're really tired, it feels so nice to kind of get back to work and bring some money in and,
do what you love.
Do what you love. I think for nanny enables you to do that because they can be, watching cartoons with your kid while they've got a snotty nose on the couch and you can just go to the library for a few hours and knock a feature over. Then, that's really, worth the extra money you pay for that, I think.
Yes, I think so too.
What about you? Best and worst thing you did?
I think the best thing was also having the nanny, but that was more of an accident when I couldn't get anything else.
Yeah.
But it ended up when I had Isabel, I did the same decision. I think that was good. I think now I'd be more confident about asking for concessions at work. Times have changed. A lot of people in my early days didn't know I had children, or I'd never talked to my children because that would have been seen as career limiting. At the Woman's Weekly, my pay was docked because I couldn't get in until 9:15. Because my kids, I had to drop them off at 8:30 and then sprint, catch the bus, get in. So I don't think I'd put up with that now. But yes, they said if you can't get in by 9, we're going to dock your pay. So I lost a half an hour pay every day. And so now I'd say that's ridiculous. Then I just put up with it because I was grateful that they were employing parents because I was the only parent on the staff.
Don't you reckon as well that's one of the sort of silver linings of COVID is that it's become so much more acceptable to work around children and people are a lot more understanding about the pressures of, having a family.
I agree with you. I think that one of the things with doing everyone working from home and Zoom and all that sort of stuff is people can see into other people's family lives and realize what they're juggling. And it may not even be children. It might be, your dog, or it might be the fact that you try and do yoga before you do work, or it might be all sorts of things.
You're a carer to like an aging parent or something like that.
Exactly. So, and I think
hopefully that will carry on, that kind of understanding about what people try to juggle and how we're all trying to have that work-life balance, and maybe that will make workplaces a bit more cognizant of that and understanding.
That it would be a lot easier to work from home if you're normally an office person, if you have to be work from home because you have to take your child to the dentist or something minor, all that sort of stuff. And actually that's one thing, when I say that, I spent almost all of Saturday doing all those things with the kids. They did Saturday morning dentists and hairdressing and all those sort of regular stuff. I spent weeks. I never had a Saturday free because that's when I did all those appointments because I was working full time. Yeah. But, parenting is a joy, honestly, and it's don't ever not do it because you're worried about juggling. Yeah. That's what I think.
You can always do it. You'll find your tribe and your your village, I suppose, even if you
I
have
think
to
so.
create it yourself. Like I've lived far away from family, like an hour away. So I've had to create that village around me. But once you do it, the freedom is amazing.
It is.
Once you find your aftercare and your nanny and the right childcare or the right family daycare, or you mix it in with friends or,
Yes.
grandparents, it's very freeing and you can just do what works for you.
Absolutely.
So we'll put some information in the show notes about the childcare subsidy, the different kinds of childcare, and how to sort of make that decision. And I think we've also done some posts about it on Rachel's List, so we'll include those as well.
Fantastic. Hopefully it inspires and helps. And we'll see you all again next week. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.